Welcome, dear listener. You are safe here. This is your time to rest, to let go, and to drift into a world where love is gentle, quiet, and endlessly kind. As you settle into your bed, feel the softness around you, the pillow beneath your cheek, the weight of your blanket, the steady rhythm of your breath. Let all the noise of the day fade, like mist dissolving into dawn. Tonight's story will take you to a quiet forest, where the trees breathe slowly, where moss hums with ancient stillness, and where a nest not built for birds, but for hearts, waits quietly beneath the stars. It is a story of gentle discovery, of companionship that arrives like moonlight across still water. There is no rush, no worry, no sharpness, only soft threads of connection, woven with patience, care, and peace. Let your breath fall in rhythm with the story. With each exhale, release the day a little more, and with each inhale, let yourself step deeper into the quiet woods of dream. Lena lived at the edge of a forest where the air always smelled faintly of pine and rain. Her cottage was small, its windows framed by ivy, its roof sloping gently beneath the weight of moss and thyme. Her days passed in stillness, tending the small garden, gathering herbs for tea, mending her shawl by the fire. It was a life of calm simplicity, but there was always something soft and unspoken within her heart, a longing not sharp, not urgent but steady, like a candle that never fully went out. Each afternoon, after her chores were finished, she would walk into the woods. The forest welcomed her quietly, leaves whispering above, roots curling like gentle guardians beneath her steps. She often paused at the same meadow, where the sun touched the grass in golden sighs, and where the silence carried the warmth of something she could not name. It was on one of these quiet walks, the bend of a stream, that she first saw it. A nest but unlike any nest she had ever known. It rested in a clearing, large enough for her to step inside, woven not from twigs but from branches threaded with velvet leaves, strands of silver moss, and long ribbons of meadow grass. It was as though the forest itself had decided to build a cradle for something unseen, something waiting. Lena stood at its edge, her hand brushing against the woven rim. It was soft, softer than it should have been, and the longer she looked, the more she felt, not with her eyes, but with her chest, that this nest was not empty, that it was holding a quiet memory, or perhaps a dream that had been waiting for her all along. She sat on the rim, testing its strength, and to her surprise, it held her gently. The weave did not creak or bend. Instead, it welcomed her weight, as if it had been waiting for her to arrive. She let her hand drift across the velvet leaves that lined its inside, and she felt warmth. Not warmth from the sun, not warmth from her own touch, but the kind of warmth that lives in the heart when one is held. A sigh escaped her lips without thought, and for the first time in a long while, she closed her eyes, not because she was tired, but because the nest seemed to ask it of her. And there, in the soft hush of the clearing, she felt something stir inside her chest, a longing that was not painful but tender, like remembering a song once loved and nearly forgotten. The breeze rustled above her, and the nest cradled her. In silence, she thought she heard something faint, like a hum, a melody not made of words but of memory. A lullaby she did not know she knew. And as she sat there, the edges of her thoughts softened, her body loosening into the weave of the forest's gift. She wondered quietly, who was this nest for? And why did it feel like home the very first time she touched it? The question lingered in her, not sharp, not urgent, just soft, like a feather drifting down through still air. And in that gentle wondering, her heart, though she did not know it, had already begun to answer. In the days that followed, Lena found herself returning to the forest with a quiet eagerness. She could not explain. Her hands still worked the garden, Her kettle still sang in the evenings, but her thoughts, soft, unhurried, often drifted back to the nest. It seemed to hum in her memory as though it had stitched a thread between her and itself, pulling her gently, never forcefully, back into its woven calm. So each evening, after the last rays of sunlight had slipped across her cottage roof, Lena would wrap her shawl around her shoulders and follow the path into the woods. The forest, in its twilight hush, felt different at that hour. The air was cooler, touched with the scent of damp leaves and faraway rain. Fireflies blinked their golden lanterns among the ferns, and the stream sang more softly as though it too was preparing for rest. And always she returned to the clearing. The nest waited, unchanged yet alive, as if the forest itself had promised to guard it. When she stepped closer, she often found herself pausing at the rim, brushing her fingertips against the velvet leaves as though greeting an old friend. Then, with a small sigh, she would settle inside. It was not sleep she sought not at first. It was simply the feeling of being held. The nest curved around her, its soft lining pressing gently against her palms, her back, her shoulders. When she leaned into it, she felt as though she were sinking into a dream made of forest breath and starlight. And soon sleep did come. Gentle, steady, and unlike any rest she had known before. For in the nest, her dreams were always the same. She saw a figure, a man, though never clear, never sharp, always softened by the haze of dream. He stood at the edge of the forest, watching the trees sway. He never spoke. He never moved toward her. But the stillness between them was full, like a cup brimming with water. Each night she woke with his presence still lingering in her chest, not heavy, not aching, but comforting, like the warmth left on a cushion where someone had sat before her. And though she could not explain it, she began to wait for him, not with impatience, not with yearning, but with the soft anticipation of someone who knows that what is meant to arrive will arrive in its own time. On the fourth night, she brought a blanket with her, a simple quilt she had stitched years ago, patterned with faded blue squares. She laid it across the nest and rested her head upon it. The forest sighed around her, the crickets singing in rhythm, and she let her eyes close. This time the dream was longer. She felt him nearer, still not beside her, but no longer at the far edge of her mind. She could almost hear his breath, and though the dream faded with dawn, she woke with the sense of being less alone. So she returned again. And again, the nights became her gentle ritual, a walk through the twilight, a seat in the nest, a drifting into dreams where someone, though she did not yet know his face, seemed to be waiting, quietly, patiently, just beyond the veil of waking. The forest seemed to approve. The trees bent their branches as though sheltering her. The grass grew softer beneath her steps. Even the wind hushed when she entered the clearing, as though holding its breath for what was yet to come. And Lena, though she did not yet say it aloud, began to feel that she was not the only one making this journey, that somewhere, in some way, someone else was walking toward her too. It was on a night brushed with silver moonlight that the change arrived. The forest was unusually still, as if each tree and each stone were listening. Even the stream seemed to pause, its voice lowered to the faintest whisper. Lena walked the familiar path with her shawl drawn close, her breath soft in the cool air, her heart expectant but calm. When she reached the clearing, she stopped. The nest was not empty. Someone was there. First, her breath caught, but not with fear, not with alarm. It was something gentler, like recognizing a melody she had only half remembered. A man lay within the woven cradle, his body curled slightly, his hand resting against the velvet leaves as though the nest itself had guided him into sleep. His face was softened by moonlight, quiet, untroubled, as if he had been waiting for her without knowing it. Lena stood at the rim, her fingers brushing the weave, the silence between them steady and full. She watched the rise and fall of his chest, the way his brow eased with each breath, the way the forest seemed to bend protectively around him. For a long while, she did not move. She simply looked, and in that looking, she felt something loosen inside her, a weight she had carried without ever naming. The man stirred, his lashes fluttering gently, and his eyes opened. They were not sharp or questioning, they met hers. With the quiet recognition of someone who had dreamed this moment many times before, no words were spoken, none were needed. She stepped closer, slowly, as though approaching a thought made real. The nest welcomed her as it always did, its lining soft beneath her hand, and when she finally sat, the man did not move away. He simply shifted slightly, leaving a space that seemed meant for her. They sat together in silence, listening to the forest breathe. The air carried the faintest trace of pine and earth, the soft rhythm of crickets, the faraway call of an owl. Time slowed, or perhaps it ceased to matter. There was only the nest, the night, and the shared stillness between them. After a long pause, the man spoke, his voice low, unhurried, as though each word had been waiting to find its way into the air. "I've been dreaming of this place," he murmured. His tone was neither surprised nor questioning, only certain, like the way one might speak of rain after clouds have gathered. Lena's lips curved into the faintest smile. "So have I." The words hung between them, gentle and true, like lanterns floating upon still water. They did not say more. They did not need to. The nest seemed to hum faintly beneath them, as if approving, as if acknowledging that the threads of dream and longing had at last drawn together. As the night deepened, Lena leaned back into the softness, her shoulder brushing his. The touch was so light it might have been a breeze, yet it settled within her like warmth sinking into stone. And when her eyes closed, she felt no hesitation, no uncertainty, only peace, as though she had returned to something she had been missing without knowing. The forest swayed gently above them, and the stars shone their quiet approval. And together, without planning it, they drifted into sleep, two dreamers who had finally found the place where their dreams touched. When dawn arrived, it came softly. The forest glowed in pale gold, dew clinging to each blade of grass. The air cool and sweet, birdsong rose gently, as though the day itself was careful not to disturb what had been found in the night. Lena stirred first, her eyes opening to the soft shimmer of morning. She felt the nest beneath her, holding her as it always did, but this time she was not alone. The warmth beside her was steady, familiar now, though she had only just known it. She turned slightly, and her gaze found him. The man lay with his head tilted toward her, his breath calm, his presence quiet. And in that moment she realized this was not a stranger. She had known him in her dreams, not by face, not by voice, but by the gentle weight of his nearness, the way silence grew full when he was near. He woke slowly, his lashes lifting, his eyes meeting hers with no surprise. It was as though they had greeted each morning together for countless lifetimes. For a long time, they simply looked at one another, the forest singing around them, the nest breathing beneath them. And then, with the faintest smile, he whispered, "I think this place belongs to us." The words settled into her heart like a key slipping into its lock. She nodded, her hand brushing along the velvet leaves that lined the nest. "Yes," she said softly, "it feels as though we built it together. Though I don't remember when." The man's gaze drifted across the weave of branches, the silver threads of moss, the shimmer of dew resting on its edges. "It isn't made of what we can hold," he said, his voice hushed. "It's made of what we carry inside, of dreams, of longing, of the love we missed, even before we knew it was missing. His words did not feel strange to her. They felt like truth, a truth she had always known but never spoken. The nest was not built by hands. It had been woven by something deeper, by the quiet ache of their hearts reaching toward one another, stitching leaves and memory and music into form until it became real. She let her palm press to the lining, closing her eyes. She felt it then, not the texture of leaf or moss, but a hum, a warmth, a softness like memory made touch. It was their dream given shape, a place where love itself had come to rest. Her eyes opened again, and she found his gaze waiting. No urgency, no demand, just presence, and in the stillness between them, she understood. They were not strangers who had met by chance. They were dreamers who had built a nest for love to remember itself. Neither of them reached for words after that. There was no need. Instead, they let the morning surround them, the nest holding them steady, as though the forest itself bowed to the quiet truth that had bloomed in their silence. Later, as the day stretched and softened, they rose together. They did not speak of leaving. They did not speak of what might come next. They simply lingered, moving slowly, as if each moment inside the nest was too precious to rush. And as Lena stepped into the sunlight beyond the clearing, with him walking beside her, she felt lighter, the longing that had always lived within her was no longer unanswered. It had found its place. The nest had not only given her rest, it had given her love, returned to her as though it had been waiting all along. In the days that followed, life settled into a rhythm as gentle as the forest's own breath. Lena and the man whose name she learned was Elias did not rush to explain their meeting, nor did they search for reasons. Instead, they allowed the days to drift softly, each one an echo of the last, each one deepening the quiet bond that had already taken root. Every evening they returned to the nest, sometimes together, walking side by side along the winding path. Sometimes separately, arriving from different trails, only to find the other already waiting, as though the nest itself had called them both to return. Within its woven walls, there was no need for much speech. They spoke in glances, in the unspoken rhythm of their movements, in the steady comfort of silence shared. Elias would sometimes hum a tune he said had no beginning, no end, a melody that seemed to rise from the nest itself. Lena would close her eyes and listen, the sound of his voice blending with the forest's hush until it became indistinguishable from the sighing of the wind. Often they simply rested. The nest cradled them both, its lining of velvet leaves soft beneath their palms, its shape holding them as gently as dusk holds the fading light. Lena would feel his presence beside her, the steady warmth of his shoulder, the calm rhythm of his breath, and it was enough. Sometimes she would lean her head against him, and he would adjust the quilt she had once brought, draping it over them both with a care so tender it felt like a vow. Other times his hand would rest quietly over hers, not gripping, not pulling, simply resting, as though reminding her that together was the most natural place to be. And the forest seemed to bow to their peace. The crickets softened their song. The leaves stilled their restless fluttering. Even the stars, when they appeared, seemed to glow lower and closer, as if watching gently, kindly from above. They dreamed together too, not always of the same things, yet always of places that felt familiar, golden meadows, soft rivers, skies filled with drifting feathers of light. When they woke, they would smile faintly, as though knowing their dreams had touched somewhere in the middle. Nothing was asked of them, nothing was demanded. There was only presence, only closeness, only the quiet certainty that they had found what their hearts had been building toward all along. And in that stillness, they discovered that love does not always bloom with suddenness or fire. Sometimes it is a steady glow, like coals that have always been warm, waiting to be uncovered. The nest held them in its patient embrace, and the forest rocked them in its ancient rhythm. Together they rested, together they breathed, and together they began to understand that peace, shared and unspoken, was love in its truest form. Night deepened slowly, as if reluctant to disturb the hush that had settled in the forest. The sky stretched wide and dark, scattered with stars that shimmered like gentle lanterns. A cool breeze drifted through the clearing, stirring the leaves. Just enough to release their faint fragrance earth, pine, and the sweetness of moss. Lena and Elias lay within the nest, the quilt gathered loosely around them. They had spoken little that evening, only a few soft words, yet the silence between them was full brimming with the ease of being known. Her head rested lightly against his shoulder, and his hand, warm and steady, cupped hers without thought, without effort. Above them, the branches swayed in slow rhythm, as though the trees themselves were singing them into rest, every so often. A leaf would drift down, spiraling gently through the air before coming to rest in the nest, like a feather falling from a distant wing. The nest seemed to hum softly, a low and steady note, not heard with the ears but felt in the chest day. Lullaby woven from dream and memory, carrying them deeper into stillness, their breaths aligned, slow and calm. Lena felt the world dissolve at its edges, the forest softening, the stars becoming blurrier with each blink, her thoughts melting into the quiet. Beside her, Elias exhaled with the same rhythm, his presence steady, as though his peace was spilling gently into hers. She did not think of tomorrow. She did not think of what had been. All that mattered was this, the warmth of his nearness, the nest's embrace, the night's endless kindness wrapping them both. The forest held them, as though it too had been waiting for this union. As though every thread of moss, every velvet leaf had been woven for this moment, two dreamers finding one another, at last cradled by the love they had been quietly building in silence all their lives. And in that space, words were no longer necessary. Love was spoken in the hush of breath, in the weight of a hand resting gently, in the shared surrender to rest. As the hours stretched, the nest became more dream than earth, more lullaby than form. Leaves drifted like feathers, the stars hummed faintly above, and Lena, with her heart finally quiet, closed her eyes fully. Elias followed, his presence steady beside her, their dreams already beginning to weave together once more. The nest held them both. And the night stretched long and kind, a cradle of love, a place where longing fell asleep at last. And so, dear listener, we leave them there resting in the nest the forest had built from dreams. May its stillness guide you too, may its quiet remind you that love is gentle and patient and always near. Let your breath slow, let your body soften. The night is kind and you are safe. Rest now and dream sweetly.